They say you never really know someone until you see them at their worst. Sarah Mitchell learned this truth on a Tuesday night when she discovered that the quiet janitor mopping floors beside her had been hiding something extraordinary for 30 years. But the real shock wasn't what he was hiding, it was what he was protecting. By the time Sarah uncovered the truth, 3 lives had already changed forever. A hospital stood on the brink of collapse, and a secret buried in cleaning supply closets was about to rewrite everything she thought she knew about success, sacrifice, and second chances.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing.
The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital flickered at 2:47 a.m., casting shadows that danced across the empty hallway like ghosts of patients long gone. Sarah Mitchell sat at the nurse's station, her eyes burning from the 12th consecutive night shift, staring at the memo that had been taped to every wall, every door, every surface that could hold paper. Notice to all staff, Mercy General Hospital will cease operations in 90 days. Final date, December 31st. 90 days. 3 months. 12 weeks until Sarah's entire world collapsed. She was 32 years old, a single mother to a 7-year-old daughter, and the head nurse of a dying hospital in a town that couldn't afford to lose it. But affordability had stopped mattering 6 months ago when Metropolitan Health Corporation opened their gleaming new facility 15 miles east. Mercy General couldn't compete with their state-of-the-art equipment, their army of specialists, their aggressive marketing campaigns that promised health care of tomorrow, today. What Mercy General had was outdated equipment, a skeleton crew of exhausted staff, and patients who were too poor, too old, or too stubborn to drive the extra miles to Metropolitan. It wasn't enough. It had never been enough. Sarah rubbed her eyes and looked down the hallway. At the far end, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting they'd switched to for cost savings, she could see Mr. Chen pushing his mop bucket with the same methodical precision he demonstrated every night for the past 5 years she'd worked here. Actually, according to hospital records, he'd been here for 30 years. 30 years of night shifts, 30 years of mopping the same floors, 30 years of being invisible. She wondered if he knew about the closure. She wondered if he cared. The truth was, Sarah barely knew him. He was quiet, kept to himself, arrived at 10 p.m. sharp every night and left at 6 a.m. exactly. He spoke broken English with a heavy accent, nodded politely when passing staff, and never, ever called in sick. That was the extent of their relationship. Professional distance, measured in nods and half-smiles exchanged in hospital corridors at ungodly hours. Tonight, though, Sarah found herself watching him more carefully. Maybe it was the exhaustion making her observe details she normally missed. Maybe it was the impending closure making her notice the people she'd taken for granted. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Mr. Chen wasn't just mopping. He was executing a pattern. Sarah had walked these halls thousands of times and never noticed. But now, with the kind of clarity that comes from sleep deprivation or desperation, she saw it. He started at the west entrance, moved east along the main corridor, took the north branch to the emergency wing, circled back through the south corridor to the surgical prep area, and returned to his starting point. The entire route took him exactly 47 minutes. She knew because she'd been timing him unconsciously while filling out patient charts. But it wasn't just the route. It was the efficiency. Mr. Chen never backtracked, never mopped the same section twice, never wasted a single motion. His mop bucket was positioned perfectly to minimize walking distance. His supplies were organized in his cart with military precision. Most used items at arm's height, less frequent items lower down, everything labeled in a system of colored tape that she'd never paid attention to before. She shook her head. She was losing it. Here she was, 3 months from unemployment,
and she was analyzing a janitor's mopping technique. She needed sleep, she needed a miracle, she needed... Nurse Mitchell? Sarah jumped. Dr. Robert Morrison stood beside her desk, and she hadn't even heard him approach. The hospital administrator looked worse than she felt. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled, and the bags under his eyes had bags of their own. Dr. Morrison, I didn't expect to see you at this hour. Couldn't sleep. He gestured at the closure notice. Funny how impending failure will do that to you. He sat down heavily in the chair beside her desk. I've been going through the numbers again, and again, and again, looking for something I missed, some way to cut costs enough to stay competitive. Any luck? None. He laughed bitterly. You know what our operating costs are compared to Metropolitan? We spend 43% more per patient for worse outcomes. We're slower, less efficient, and bleeding money from every department. Even if I fired half the staff, which I can't do because we're already understaffed, we still couldn't match their numbers. Sarah had heard this speech before. Dr. Morrison wasn't a bad administrator. He genuinely cared about Mercy General, about the community it served, about the staff who'd devoted their careers to this place. But caring wasn't enough when economics came calling. There has to be something, Sarah said, more out of habit than hope. There isn't. I've looked at everything. Supply costs, staffing models, patient flow, operational efficiency. He stopped mid-sentence, staring down the hallway. Is that Chen? Yes, working his usual shift. 30 years, Dr. Morrison murmured. Started here the same week I did. I was a young, ambitious administrator ready to revolutionize healthcare. He was a refugee who barely spoke English, grateful for any job. We've both been here 30 years. And look at us now, both about to be unemployed. Sarah followed his gaze. Mr. Chen had finished his circuit and was now at his supply closet, meticulously organizing his equipment for the next round. Even from this distance, she could see the precision of his movements. Has he always been this methodical? Sarah asked. Dr. Morrison looked at her curiously. Chen? I suppose so. He's never given us any trouble. Shows up, does his work, goes home. Model employee, really. Why do you ask? No reason, just noticing things, I guess. Dr. Morrison stood up, stretching his back with a wince. Well, notice this. We've got exactly 89 days left. After that, you're going to need to find another job. And so will I. And so will Chen, and everyone else in this building. Metropolitan isn't hiring. County General is fully staffed. Most of our people are going to have to relocate or change careers. He paused at the door. I'm sorry, Sarah. I know you can't leave because of your mother. I wish I had better news. After he left, Sarah sat in silence, listening to the hum of the ventilation system and the distant beep of patient monitors. Her mother had stage 4 cancer. She was in hospice care at Sunset Manor, just 3 blocks from this hospital. She visited every day before or after her shifts. Moving wasn't an option. Finding another job in this small town wasn't possible. She was trapped. Down the hallway, Mr. Chen emerged from his supply closet and began his next circuit. Sarah watched him with new intensity. There was something almost meditative about his work. Every movement served a purpose. Nothing was wasted. She thought about what Dr. Morrison had said. Operational efficiency, patient flow, cost per patient. What?
Sarah started watching Mr. Chen the next night. Not obviously. She didn't want him to think she was checking up on him, or worse, that she was some kind of creep. She just paid attention. She noticed that he didn't just follow the same route every 47 minutes. He adjusted his pattern based on hospital activity.
When the emergency room got busy, he circled back through those corridors more frequently. When a surgical procedure was scheduled, he made sure those areas were pristine 30 minutes before the scheduled time. He seemed to have an internal map of the entire hospital's rhythm. By the third night, Sarah had started taking notes. She told herself she was just being observant, that it was meaningless, that she was grasping at straws. But she couldn't stop. She noticed that Mr. Chen had created a system for tracking supply inventory. He didn't just clean, he monitored. When he passed through the supply closets, his eyes would scan the shelves with practiced efficiency. Sarah saw him make small marks on a notepad he kept in his shirt pocket. She got curious enough to check the official inventory logs. The hospital did inventory counts every 2 weeks. Supplies would frequently run out between counts, requiring emergency orders at premium prices. But Sarah started noticing something strange. Mr. Chen seemed to predict shortages before they happened. She saw him, on 3 separate occasions, quietly move supplies from overstocked closets to understocked ones during his rounds. Not stealing, redistributing, optimizing. The hospital's official system didn't even register these micro-adjustments, but they prevented several emergency orders that week alone. On the 5th night, Sarah decided to follow his route herself during her break. She walked the exact path Mr. Chen took, timing herself, trying to understand what made his pattern so efficient. It took her 73 minutes to complete what took him 47. She stood in the main corridor baffled and slightly embarrassed. She was a nurse with 12 years of experience, and she couldn't match the efficiency of a janitor's cleaning route. More than that, she realized she didn't actually know the optimal path through the hospital. She just knew her usual routes between the nurse's station, patient rooms, and break room. She'd never thought about the building as a complete system. Mr. Chen had. That night, when Mr. Chen took his break at 2 a.m., exactly 2 a.m., she'd learned, never a minute early or late, Sarah found herself approaching his table in the break room. He sat alone as always, eating homemade food from a worn plastic container. He looked up surprised when she sat down across from him. "Mr. Chen, I hope I'm not disturbing you." He shook his head politely, but his eyes showed confusion. In 5 years, they'd probably exchanged less than 50 words total. "I've been noticing your work," Sarah said carefully. "Your route through the hospital? It's very, efficient." Mr. Chen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Wariness, maybe, or fear. "Just cleaning," he said in his heavily accented English. "Do my job." "You do more than your job," Sarah said. "You've optimized it. The route, the timing, the supply management. You've created a system." Mr. Chen set down his chopsticks slowly. "Is problem? I do something wrong?" No, not at all. I'm just impressed and curious. How did you figure it all out?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to determine if this was some kind of trap. Finally, he spoke. 30 years I watch. I learn. Hospital like body. Everything connect. Everything flow. You make one part better, other parts better too. I see nurses walk too much, waste time. I see supplies in wrong place. I see money spent on rush orders for things already here, just wrong closet. So I fix. Quiet. Nobody notice. Nobody noticed, Sarah agreed softly. But I'm noticing now. Mr. Chen, the hospital is closing in less than 3 months. Dr. Morrison says we can't compete with Metropolitan because we're not efficient enough. But what if we could be? What if we used your methods? Mr. Chen's face closed off immediately. Not my place. I just janitor. But not my place, he repeated, standing up. He carefully packed his empty container, nodded politely to Sarah, and left the break room. Sarah sat alone, her mind racing. She had seen something important, she was sure of it, but she didn't know enough yet. She needed to understand the full scope of what Mr. Chen had created. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah became obsessed. She used every break, every quiet moment to study the hospital's operations through the lens of efficiency. She timed everything: how long it took nurses to retrieve supplies, how many steps were wasted walking between frequently used areas, how often supplies ran out unexpectedly, how many redundant processes existed in patient care procedures. The numbers were damning. The hospital was hemorrhaging time and money in 1,000 small ways. Nothing dramatic, just endless tiny inefficiencies that added up to catastrophic waste. A nurse walking an extra 50 feet to get supplies she used 20 times per shift. Supplies stored far from where they were used most. Outdated procedures that required 3 people to do what 1 could do with better systems. Equipment stored illogically, requiring staff to hunt for what they needed. Sarah started to see the hospital the way she imagined Mr. Chen saw it, as a system with flow and friction, optimization and waste. And once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. She began making changes in her own work, small things at first. She reorganized the nurses' station to put the most used supplies within arm's reach. She created a simple system for nurses to communicate supply needs before they became critical. She mapped out the most efficient route for medication rounds and shared it with her team. Within a week, her department's efficiency had noticeably improved. Nurses spent less time searching and walking, more time with patients. Medication rounds that used to take 45 minutes now took 32. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Then came the incident that changed everything. It was a Tuesday night, 3 weeks before the hospital's scheduled closure. Sarah was covering for a sick colleague in the emergency department when a multi-vehicle accident brought in 7 patients simultaneously. The ER was chaos, nowhere near enough staff, supplies running low, patients critical. Sarah found herself running back and forth for supplies, wasting precious minutes, watching patient conditions deteriorate because the system was breaking down under stress. She grabbed a crash cart from the hallway, opened it, and discovered it was missing critical medication. Someone had used it and not restocked it properly. In that moment, with a patient coding in front of her and no epinephrine immediately available, Sarah felt something break inside her. Not her spirit, her tolerance for inefficiency. She stabilized the patient using an alternative protocol, but it had been close. Too close. After the crisis passed and all 7 patients were stabilized, Sarah stood in the hallway, hands shaking, and made a decision. She found Mr. Chen in his supply closet organizing his cart for the next round. "I need your help," she said without preamble. "That chaos tonight, it almost killed someone. And it wasn't the staff's fault, it's the system. This entire hospital is running on broken systems, and we're 3 weeks from closing because we can't compete with Metropolitan's efficiency. But you know how to fix it, don't you? You've been fixing it for 30 years. Quietly, without recognition, without thanks. You've probably saved lives with your optimizations, and nobody even knows it. But I know it now. And I'm asking you, will you help me? Not for the hospital, not even for the jobs. For the patients. They deserve better than what we're giving them." Mr. Chen's hands stilled. When he finally looked at her, his eyes were wet. "You think anyone will listen? To Chinese janitor with bad English?" "They will listen to me," Sarah said firmly. "But I need you to teach me everything you know, everything you've learned in 30 years. Will you help me?" The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Mr. Chen reached into his cart and pulled out a worn notebook. He handed it to Sarah. "I write everything," he said. 30 years. Every problem I see, every solution I make. I think maybe someday someone will want to know. I think maybe I wrong. But maybe you different." Sarah opened the notebook. It was filled with dense handwriting, diagrams, calculations, observations, 30 years of institutional knowledge that had never been acknowledged, never been valued, never been used. "Oh my God," she whispered. This is everything.
It's work of invisible man. Nobody see invisible man. Nobody listen. I see you, Sarah said firmly. And I'm listening. And together, we're going to save this hospital. Mr. Chen looked skeptical, but there was something else in his expression too. Something that might have been hope. Sarah had found the solution hidden in 30 years of invisible work. But could she convince anyone that a janitor's notebook held the key to saving an entire hospital? And more importantly, was Mr. Chen's
30-year optimization project the brilliant solution she thought it was? Or was there something darker hidden beneath the surface? Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah spent every available hour for the next week studying Mr. Chen's notebook. It was extraordinary. Page after page of observations, measurements, solutions. He had documented everything: traffic patterns through the hospital, optimal supply placements, waste reduction strategies, staffing flow inefficiencies, equipment utilization rates. But it was more than data. Mr. Chen had created a philosophy of hospital operations based on respect for everyone's time and the belief that small improvements, consistently applied, led to massive change. He called it the way of water, finding the path of least resistance, flowing around obstacles, wearing away inefficiency through persistent, gentle pressure. Sarah began implementing his strategies in the nursing department. She reorganized supply closets based on usage frequency and proximity to need. She created visual management systems so nurses could see at a glance what supplies were running low. She streamlined handoff procedures between shifts. She eliminated redundant paperwork and simplified common procedures. The results were remarkable. Within 1 week, her department had reduced supply retrieval time by 38%. Patient care hours increased because nurses spent less time on administrative tasks. Error rates dropped because staff were less exhausted, less rushed, less stressed. Other nurses noticed. They started asking questions. Sarah shared what she'd learned, giving full credit to Mr. Chen, though most people seemed surprised that the quiet janitor had created these systems. Some were skeptical. A few were dismissive. But the data spoke for itself. On day 9, Sarah requested a meeting with Dr. Morrison. She brought printouts, charts, data, everything she'd collected proving that Mr. Chen's methods worked. She was nervous but confident. This was going to save the hospital. This was going to change everything. Dr. Morrison looked exhausted when she entered his office. He barely glanced at her materials before speaking. "Sarah, if this is about trying to keep the hospital open, I need you to stop. The board met yesterday. The closure is final. We've already begun transfer arrangements for our patients." "Just look at the data," Sarah insisted, spreading her charts across his desk. "In 9 days, I've reduced operational costs in nursing by 37% while improving patient outcomes. And this is just one department. Mr. Chen's systems could work throughout the entire hospital." Dr. Morrison finally looked at the charts. Really looked. His expression changed from dismissal to confusion to something like shock. "How did you—" He trailed off, studying the numbers. 37%? In 9 days? That's not possible. It is possible. It happened. And it's all based on methods that Mr. Chen, our night janitor, has been developing and implementing for 30 years. Dr. Morrison looked up sharply. "Chen? The janitor?" "Yes, he's been optimizing hospital operations for 3 decades. Nobody noticed because he's invisible. But his systems work, Dr. Morrison. If we implement them hospital-wide, we can compete with Metropolitan. We can survive." Dr. Morrison sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Sarah, I don't even know what to say. If these numbers are accurate—" "They are. I can prove it. Give me access to operational data from other departments. Give me 2 weeks. I'll show you how we can transform this hospital." We don't have 2 weeks. We have 17 days before closure. Then give me 17 days. Dr. Morrison stared at her for a long moment. Then he made a decision. Fine. You have access to whatever data you need. But Sarah, don't get your hopes up. Even if everything you're saying is true, convincing the board to reverse a closure decision in 17 days, that's asking for a miracle. Then let's make a miracle, Sarah said. She left his office with authorization to access hospital-wide operational data. That night, she and Mr. Chen met in an empty conference room. Sarah spread out the data, and together, they began analyzing every department, every system, every process in Mercy General Hospital. What they discovered was simultaneously heartbreaking and inspiring. The hospital was bleeding money, yes, but not because of fundamental flaws. It was dying from 1,000 paper cuts, each one preventable. Supplies ordered in bulk without regard to actual usage rates. Equipment stored in convenient locations for administrators rather than optimal locations for users. Procedures designed by committees who'd never actually performed them. Systems layered upon systems, each addition making sense in isolation, but creating compounding inefficiency when combined. Metropolitan Health Corporation wasn't succeeding because they were smarter or better. They were succeeding because they'd been built from the ground up with efficiency in mind. Mercy General had evolved organically over decades, accumulating inefficiency like sediment. But Mr. Chen had been fighting that entropy for 30 years. Every optimization he'd made, every small improvement, every redistribution of supplies, he'd been holding back the tide single-handedly. If we'd listened to you 10 years ago, Sarah said quietly, studying the data, we'd probably be thriving right now. Mr. Chen shook his head. Nobody listened then. Nobody listened now. I just janitor. You're not just anything, Sarah said firmly. You're probably the most valuable person in this entire hospital. We just didn't know it. Over the next 5 days, Sarah worked with an intensity she'd never experienced before. She brought other nurses into the project. They implemented Mr. Chen's systems department by department, reorganized supply closets, streamlined procedures, eliminated waste. Each department showed immediate improvement. But it wasn't enough. On day 14, 3 days before the scheduled closure, Sarah met with Dr. Morrison again. She had the data, she had the proof, she had everything except time. The board meets tomorrow, Dr. Morrison said. If you're going to make a case for staying open, this is your chance. But Sarah, you need to understand the politics here. The board has already committed to closure. Several members have financial interests in Metropolitan. Reversing course would mean admitting they made a mistake. That's a hard sell. I have to try. I know, and I'll support you. But I need you to be prepared for failure. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about all the people who would lose their jobs, the patients who would lose their community hospital, the town that would lose a vital institution, all because nobody had listened to a janitor who'd been trying to help for 30 years. She arrived at the hospital early for her shift, frustrated and exhausted. She found Mr. Chen in his usual supply closet, preparing for his rounds. Tomorrow I present to the board, she told him. I wish you could be there. It's your work, your genius. You deserve the recognition. Mr. Chen smiled sadly. Recognition, not important. Hospital staying open, that important. It's important to me. You should be there. Board not want to hear from janitor. Then we'll make them want to hear from you. Mr. Chen looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You good person, Nurse Sarah. You see people others don't see. That's rare. He paused. I tell you something. Maybe help tomorrow, maybe not. What is it? I'm not just janitor, Mr. Chen said quietly. Long time ago, in China, I was hospital administrator, big hospital, in Shanghai. I manage efficiency, operations, everything. Then Tiananmen Square happened. I speak out. Government not like. So I lose everything. Come to America with nothing. No credentials recognized. No English. No connections. Only job I can get is janitor. You were an administrator? Sarah stared at him, stunned. Was. Long time ago. Different life. But I remember everything about making hospitals work. So when I become janitor here, I think maybe I can still help. Just different way. Quiet way. Nobody need to know who I was. I just do good work. Mr. Chen. It's okay. I make peace with this. This good life too. Honest work, help people. Enough for me. He smiled. But if you want to save hospital tomorrow, you tell the board this. Efficiency, not about money, is about respect. Respect for time, respect for work, respect for people. When you respect people, system become better. When you ignore people, he gestured around the hospital, this happen. Sarah left the supply closet with tears in her eyes. All this time, they'd had an expert administrator working as their janitor. Someone who could have transformed the hospital years ago, but nobody had asked. Nobody had listened. Nobody had seen him. She spent the rest of her shift preparing her presentation. She included everything, the data, the implementation results, the cost savings, the improved patient outcomes. But she also included Mr. Chen's story, not to embarrass him, but to illustrate a point. Brilliance often exists in places we don't think to look. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. the next day. Sarah had exactly 12 hours to save a hospital.
She didn't know if it would be enough. Tomorrow, Sarah would face the board with evidence that could save Mercy General. But even with data, proof, and a 30-year optimization project, would anyone listen to a nurse advocating for a janitor's vision? Or would politics, ego, and financial interests bury the truth forever?
The board meeting was held in a conference room Sarah had never entered before. One of those spaces reserved for people who made decisions while others lived with the consequences. 10 board members sat around a polished mahogany table. Dr. Morrison sat at one end, looking like a man about to witness an execution. Sarah stood at the front of the room with her laptop, her charts, and a desperate hope that data could overcome politics. "Thank you for giving me this time," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know the board has already made its decision regarding closure. I'm here to present new information that I believe warrants reconsidering that decision." One of the board members, a man in an expensive suit whose name tag read Thompson, checked his watch pointedly. "Ms. Mitchell, we've reviewed all possible options over the past 6 months. What could you possibly present in 20 minutes that would change our analysis?" Sarah pulled up her first slide. "In the past 2 weeks, I've reduced operational costs in multiple departments by an average of 36%, while simultaneously improving patient care quality. I believe these same improvements can be implemented hospital-wide, making Mercy General not just competitive with Metropolitan, but potentially more efficient." That got their attention. Thompson leaned forward. 36%? That's impossible. We've consulted with 3 different efficiency firms. None of them found savings anywhere near that level. "That's because they were looking in the wrong places," Sarah said. She pulled up her data. "The efficiency firms focus on big-picture items, staffing levels, equipment purchases, departmental restructuring. But Mercy General's inefficiency problem isn't big picture. It's accumulated small-scale waste, death by 1,000 cuts." For the next 15 minutes, Sarah walked them through everything: the supply chain optimizations, the workflow improvements, the elimination of redundant procedures, the reorganization of physical space. She showed them concrete data from the departments where she'd implemented changes. Time saved, money saved, error rates reduced, patient satisfaction improved. The board members' skepticism gradually shifted to interest. They asked questions, they challenged her numbers, but they were listening. Then Thompson asked the question Sarah had been dreading and hoping for simultaneously. Where did these optimization strategies come from?
Did you hire a consultant? Sarah took a breath. No. These systems were developed over 30 years by Mr. Chen, one of our night janitors. He's been implementing and refining these optimizations throughout the hospital, but because he worked night shifts and his role was considered low level, nobody noticed what he was doing. The room went quiet. Another board member, a woman named Patricia Garcia, spoke up. You're telling us that a janitor has been running unauthorized optimization projects for 3 decades? Not unauthorized, just unrecognized. Mr. Chen saw inefficiencies and fixed them within the scope of his work. He redistributed supplies, streamlined his own workflows, and documented everything. When I discovered what he'd been doing, I realized his methods could be applied systematically throughout the hospital. But he's a janitor, Thompson said, not unkindly, just confused. How would a janitor even know how to optimize hospital operations? Because he's not just a janitor, Sarah said. Mr. Chen was a hospital administrator in China before he came to the United States as a refugee. He managed a large hospital in Shanghai. His credentials weren't recognized here, he didn't speak English well, and he had no connections. The only job he could get was janitorial work. But he never stopped being an expert. He just became an invisible one. Dr. Morrison spoke up for the first time. I've reviewed all of Sarah's data personally. Everything she's presenting is accurate. The improvements are real, the cost savings are substantial, and the methods are replicable. If we could implement these systems hospital-wide before closure, that's 17 days, Thompson interrupted. You're asking us to reverse a closure decision, restructure operational systems throughout the entire hospital, and do it in 17 days? I'm asking you to delay closure by 3 months, Sarah countered. Give us 90 days to prove this works. If we can't show sustained improvement and cost savings that make us competitive with Metropolitan, then proceed with closure. But if we can, she pulled up her final slide, a projection of what Mercy General's numbers could look like with full implementation of Mr. Chen's systems. Then you'll have a hospital that serves this community and actually makes money doing it. The room erupted in simultaneous conversation. Board members argued among themselves. Some were intrigued, some were skeptical. Thompson and Garcia seemed particularly engaged in a heated discussion. Finally, Thompson raised his hand for quiet. Ms. Mitchell, this is unexpected. The data is compelling, I'll grant you that. But you're asking us to gamble on the theories of a janitor. The conference room door opened. Mr. Chen stood in the doorway, wearing his janitorial uniform, looking small and out of place among the suits and polish of the boardroom. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said in his accented English, but I need to speak. Dr. Morrison stood up. Chen, this isn't... Please, Mr. Chen said quietly. They talk about me. I should be here. There was a long, awkward silence. Then Patricia Garcia gestured to an empty chair. Come in, Mr. Chen. We'd like to hear what you have to say. Mr. Chen entered the room and sat down, looking uncomfortable but determined. Nurse Sarah, she show you data. Data is good, data is true, but I want to tell you why I do this work. He pulled out his worn notebook and set it on the table. 30 years ago, I come to this hospital. I have nothing. No credentials, no language, no future. But this hospital give me job. Not good job, not important job, but honest job. Give me dignity when I have none. Let me rebuild life in new country. The board members listened in silence. So I think how I say thank you. I cannot give money, I cannot give big things, but I can give what I know. I know hospitals. I know how to make them better. So every night I work, I watch. I learn this hospital like my own body. I see where it hurt, where it waste, where it could be better, and I fix. Little bit at a time. 30 years of little bits. He opened his notebook, showing pages filled with his careful handwriting. This not about being smart.
This is about caring. When you care about place, about people, you pay attention. You see what others miss. This hospital dying not because of Metropolitan, dying because nobody pay attention to small things. Small things add up. Thompson leaned forward. Mr. Chen, if you were an administrator in China, why didn't you tell anyone here? Why work as a janitor when you could have contributed so much more? Mr. Chen smiled sadly. Who would believe? Chinese refugee with bad English, no American credentials, no proof of who I was before? I show up and say, I was administrator in Shanghai, give me important job. Nobody believe. So I do what I can do. I clean floors, and while I clean, I fix other things too. But someone should have recognized your potential, Patricia Garcia said. 30 years is a long time to be overlooked. It's okay. I not need recognition. I need purpose. Helping hospital was purpose. Enough for me. He looked at Sarah. But Nurse Sarah, she different. She see invisible people. She pay attention. She take cleaning man's notebook seriously. That why she can save hospital. Not because of data. Because she know how to see. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Thompson spoke, his voice quieter than before. Mr. Chen, if we were to delay closure and attempt a systematic implementation of your methods, would you be willing to work with our management team as a consultant? We would, of course, compensate you appropriately for your expertise. Mr. Chen worked surprised. I still work as janitor? You could work in whatever capacity you prefer, Patricia Garcia said, but your knowledge is clearly too valuable to limit to janitorial work alone. Mr. Chen looked at Sarah, then back at the board. I think about it, he said carefully. But first, hospital need to stay open. That most important. Thompson nodded slowly. He looked around the table at his fellow board members. I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of postponing closure for 90 days to allow full implementation of these operational improvements? 7 hands went up, 2 abstained, 1 voted no. Motion passes. Dr. Morrison, you have 90 days to prove this works. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Chen, we're counting on you. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. They'd actually done it. But as she left the boardroom with Mr. Chen and Dr. Morrison, she felt more anxiety than triumph. Now they had to deliver on the promise.
90 days to transform an entire hospital. 90 days to prove that 30 years of invisible work could save an institution. 90 days to perform a miracle.
The first week was chaos. Dr. Morrison assembled a task force. Sarah, Mr. Chen, 2 other senior nurses, the head of facilities, and the chief financial officer. Their mission? Implement Mr. Chen's optimization systems throughout every department of Mercy General Hospital in 90 days. It sounded impossible. It probably was impossible, but they tried anyway. Sarah coordinated the nursing departments. She brought in nurses from every shift, every specialty, and walked them through the new systems. Some embraced the changes immediately. Others resisted. Change always met resistance, even when the change was beneficial. I've been doing it this way for 15 years, one veteran nurse argued. Why should I change now? Because this way is faster and safer, Sarah explained patiently. Look at the data. Medication errors are down 40% in departments that have adopted these protocols. I don't trust data, I trust experience. These conversations happen dozens of times daily. Sarah learned that transforming systems was easy compared to transforming attitudes. But slowly, persistently, the changes took root. Nurses who tried the new workflows discovered they really did save time. Supply closets reorganized according to Mr. Chen's principles really were more efficient. Visual management systems really did reduce errors. Mr. Chen worked with the facilities and operations teams. He was hesitant at first, clearly uncomfortable with his new role as consultant rather than janitor. But as people saw his expertise in action, the awkwardness faded. He would walk through a department, spend 30 minutes observing,
and then sketch out a reorganization plan that immediately made sense to everyone who saw it. "How do you do that?" the head of facilities asked, after Mr. Chen redesigned the surgical supply area in 20 minutes. "I watch people work, see where they walk too much, reach too far, search too long. Then I make it easier." By week 3, they were seeing results. Department by department, efficiency improved, supply costs dropped, patient satisfaction scores climbed. The changes were working. But there was a problem. Sarah first noticed it during a late-night shift in week 4. She was reviewing financial reports with Dr. Morrison, and something didn't add up. They were saving money on operations, yes, but not quite as much as projected. The gap wasn't large, maybe 5 to 7%, but it was consistent across multiple departments. "I don't understand," Sarah said, staring at the spreadsheet. "We've implemented all the optimizations. The workflow improvements are documented. Where's the money going?" Dr. Morrison frowned. "Could be accounting lag. Sometimes savings don't show up immediately in the reports." But Sarah couldn't shake her feeling that something was off. She started digging deeper into the numbers, cross-referencing supply orders with usage rates, comparing staffing costs with scheduling reports. That's when she found it. Certain supply orders were being placed at premium rates, despite the new just-in-time ordering system that should have prevented that. Equipment was being purchased from expensive vendors when cheaper alternatives existed. Contract services were being renewed at inflated rates. Someone was sabotaging the cost savings. Sarah brought her findings to Dr. Morrison. His face went pale as he reviewed her data. "This can't be right," he muttered. "These orders are being approved by—" He trailed off, looking sick. "By who?" Sarah pressed. "By board members. Specifically, by Thompson and 2 others. Dr. Morrison sat back heavily. "Oh God. They have financial interests in the vendors." The pieces clicked into place. Thompson and his allies had voted for the 90-day delay not to save the hospital, but to extract maximum profit before closure. They'd supported the optimization project publicly while undermining it privately, ensuring that Mercy General would show improvement, but not enough to actually survive. "What do we do?" Dr. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "If we expose this, we expose 3 board members for corruption. That will trigger investigations, lawsuits, media coverage. The hospital will be caught in the middle of a scandal right when we're trying to prove we can survive. But if we don't expose it, we can't show our real savings. The board will vote to close based on falsified numbers." "I know," Dr. Morrison rubbed his face. "We're damned either way." Sarah thought about Mr. Chen. 30 years of quiet work to help a hospital that was being deliberately sabotaged by the people who were supposed to lead it. 30 years of invisible effort undermined by visible corruption. "There has to be another way," she said. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She went to the hospital early, found Mr. Chen preparing for his shift. "We have a problem," she told him, and explained everything. Mr. Chen listened quietly. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. "In China, I speak out about corruption. I try to expose bad people. That's why I lose everything. So I come to America thinking, this time I be quiet. I just do good work, not make trouble. I'm not asking you to make trouble, but trouble find us anyway. I learned something in 30 years. Quiet work is good, but silence about wrong things, that not good. That just letting bad people win. So what do we do?" Mr. Chen thought for a moment. "We make them expose themselves." Over the next 3 days, Sarah and Mr. Chen worked with Dr. Morrison to create a trap. They continued implementing optimizations publicly while carefully documenting every suspicious transaction privately. They let the corrupt board members think their scheme was working. Then at the 60-day progress review, Dr. Morrison presented 2 sets of numbers to the full board. "These are our operational improvements over the past 2 months," he said, showing the public numbers, good but not great, showing modest savings. "As you can see, we've made progress, but fallen short of projections." Thompson smiled, sensing victory. "So, the experiment has failed?" "Not quite," Dr. Morrison said, pulling up a second presentation. "These are the same numbers, but with certain transactions removed.
specifically supply orders placed at premium rates despite available cheaper alternatives, equipment purchased from vendors with inflated pricing, and contract services renewed at rates significantly above market value. The room went silent. When we remove these anomalous transactions, Dr. Morrison continued, his voice hard, our actual savings exceed projections by 12%. Someone has been deliberately sabotaging our cost-cutting efforts, and the approvals for these transactions trace back to 3 specific board members. He displayed the evidence, every transaction, every approval, every conflict of interest. Patricia Garcia stared at the data, her face darkening with anger. Thompson stood up abruptly. "This is absurd. You can't possibly suggest." "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm showing evidence. The question is, what does this board want to do about it?" What followed was 2 hours of the most intense meeting Sarah had ever witnessed. Thompson and his allies tried to deflect, justify, minimize, but the data was damning. Patricia Garcia led the charge against them, and by the end, all 3 corrupt board members had resigned under threat of prosecution. "We'll need to find replacement," Patricia said, now the acting board chair. "But first, let's talk about what happens next for Mercy General." With corruption exposed and the board in turmoil, Mercy General stood at a crossroads. They'd proven the optimizations worked. They'd survived sabotage. But could they survive the aftermath? And what would become of the nurse and janitor who'd risked everything to expose the truth?
The emergency board meeting was called for day 73. Patricia Garcia, now officially board chair, got straight to business. "We need to discuss 3 things," she said. "First, the status of our operational improvements. Second, our competitive position relative to Metropolitan. Third, the future of Mercy General Hospital." Dr. Morrison presented the updated numbers. With the corrupt transactions removed and full implementation of Mr. Chen's systems, Mercy General's operational efficiency had improved by 41%. Cost per patient was now lower than Metropolitan. Patient satisfaction scores were the highest they'd been in a decade. Retention had actually improved despite the closure threat. "These results are extraordinary," Patricia said. Which brings me to the second point. I contacted Metropolitan Health Corporation and asked them how they'd achieved their efficiency gains. Would you like to know what they told me? The room was silent. They hired an efficiency consulting firm called Optimal Healthcare Solutions. That firm's entire methodology is based on principles of flow optimization, waste reduction, and continuous improvement. Principles remarkably similar to what Mr. Chen has been developing for 30 years. Patricia smiled. In fact, when I showed them Mr. Chen's notebook, they admitted that his systems are more refined than theirs. They've been implementing a commercial version of what he created organically. Mr. Chen looked shocked. "My systems?" "Your systems." Which brings me to my third point. Patricia looked around the table. I propose that we not only keep Mercy General open, but that we transform it into a teaching hospital, specifically a training center for operational excellence in healthcare. We patent Mr. Chen's methodologies, we train other hospitals in these techniques, and we generate revenue not just from patient care, but from consulting and education. Sarah felt her heart racing. "You mean turn what almost killed us into our competitive advantage?" "Exactly. Metropolitan has fancy equipment and aggressive marketing. We'll have something better, proven systems that actually work, and a training program to teach them. Hospitals across the country are struggling with the same efficiency problems we had. We can help them while generating revenue and keeping Mercy General not just alive, but thriving." The vote was unanimous. Over the next few weeks, the transformation accelerated. Patricia worked with Dr. Morrison to restructure Mercy General's business model. Sarah was promoted to Director of Operational Excellence, leading the new training program. And Mr. Chen faced the most difficult decision. Sarah found him in his supply closet on day 85, cleaning his cart with the same meticulous care he'd always shown. "You know you don't have to do this anymore," Sarah said gently. "Patricia's offering you the position of Chief Efficiency Officer, a 6-figure salary, a real office, recognition for everything you've done." Mr. Chen continued organizing his supplies. "I know. So why are you still mopping floors?" Because I like mopping floors. He smiled. I know sound crazy, but I spent 30 years being invisible, peaceful. No pressure, no politics, no people expecting things. Just good work, honest work. I'm not sure I want to give that up. But you deserve recognition. You deserve to be seen. Maybe. But maybe being seen, not always good thing. In China, I was seen. I had status, respect, authority. Then I lose everything. Here, I invisible. I have nothing, but I build something anyway. Something good. Maybe that worth more than being seen. Sarah understood, but it frustrated her. So what are you going to do? I think, he paused, I think maybe both. I work as consultant, teach people my systems, but I also keep janitor job, maybe half-time each. That way I stay connected to real work, not just talk about it, and I stay humble, stay remembering where I come from. It was a uniquely Mr. Chen solution, practical, humble, and quietly brilliant. The board won't understand, Sarah said. Board not need to understand. You understand. That enough. On day 90, the final board meeting arrived. Dr. Morrison presented the complete 90-day results. Operational costs down 43%. Patient outcomes improved across every metric. Staff morale at a 5-year high. Financial projections showing profitability within 6 months. Mercy General Hospital is not only viable, it's positioned to become a leader in operational excellence for healthcare. Patricia called for a vote, all in favor of keeping Mercy General Hospital open permanently. Every hand in the room went up. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. After the meeting, she found Mr. Chen in the hallway, mopping floors on his usual route. She stood watching him for a moment. This man, who'd saved a hospital by being invisible, who'd chosen humility over recognition, who changed everything by changing small things consistently for 30 years. We won, she said. Mr. Chen looked up and smiled. We did good work. You did good work. I just noticed it. Noticing important too. World full of invisible people doing important things. But if nobody notice, nobody learn, nobody benefit. You noticed. You listened. You acted. That rare. I learned from the best. Mr. Chen returned to mopping floors, his movements as precise and efficient as ever. You know what I learned in 30 years? Big changes come from small actions repeated with care. One mop stroke not matter, but million mop strokes, that change everything. Same with hospital, same with life. She watched him work for a moment longer, then returned to her new office to begin developing training programs. She had work to do. They all had work to do. But for the first time in months, it felt like work that mattered. Work that would last. Work that would help people. And it all started because someone had noticed the invisible man with the mop.
6 months later, Mercy General Hospital looked like a different place. The halls were bustling with staff from other hospitals who'd come for training in the Chen method of operational excellence. Revenue from consulting and education programs had exceeded projections. Patient care continued to improve. The hospital that had been dying was now thriving. Sarah stood in the main corridor, watching the morning shift change. Nurses moved efficiently through their routines, using the optimized workflows. Supply closets were organized perfectly. Everything flowed. Mr. Chen approached, pushing his cart. He still worked as a janitor 3 days a week and served as a consultant the other 4. It was an unusual arrangement, but it worked for him. He'd found his balance between visibility and invisibility, between recognition and peace. "Morning rounds," he said, gesturing at the hallway. "You want to walk with me?" Sarah fell into step beside him. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following the route he'd perfected over 30 years. "I've been thinking about something," Sarah said, "about what happened here, about what it all means." "And?" I think we tell this story wrong. We call it the janitor who saved the hospital, or the nurse who saw what others missed. But that's not really it, is it? Mr. Chen smiled. What is it then? It's about systems, not the kind you create with spreadsheets and consultants, the kind you create by paying attention, by caring, by respecting everyone's time and work and dignity. Sarah paused. You didn't save this hospital because you were secretly brilliant. You saved it because you cared enough to pay attention for 30 years. And you saved it because you cared enough to listen, Mr. Chen added. Most people, they see janitor and stop looking. You keep looking. You ask questions. You respect answers even when they come from unexpected places. They reached the supply closet where it had all begun, where Sarah had first noticed Mr. Chen's notebook, where he'd first shared his 30 years of invisible work. There's something I never asked you. In all those years of working invisibly, of watching people ignore your expertise, of being overlooked and undervalued, did you ever get angry? Did you ever want to quit? Mr. Chen thought for a long moment. Sometimes, he admitted. Sometimes I think, why I do this? Nobody care. Nobody notice. I work hard, make things better, and hospital's still struggling. What the point? So why didn't you quit? Because work not about recognition, Mr. Chen said simply. Work about what you put into world. I put in better systems, better processes, better care for patients. That real. That matter. Whether people notice or not, that's still real. Sarah understood. In a world obsessed with visibility, status, and recognition, Mr. Chen had found something more valuable, a purpose that didn't depend on external validation. But I'm glad people notice now, Mr. Chen added with a smile. Not for me, for others like me. All the invisible people doing important work, janitors, cafeteria workers, maintenance staff, everyone people don't see. Maybe now people looked a little harder. Maybe now they ask questions. That was perhaps the most profound change at Mercy General. The culture had shifted. Staff members at every level were encouraged to identify problems and propose solutions. The organizational hierarchy still existed, but the flow of ideas had become democratic. Good ideas were recognized regardless of their source. We're starting to get requests from other hospitals, Sarah told him. Not just for training in your methods, but for help changing their cultures. They want to know how we went from a dying hospital to a teaching institution in 6 months. What you tell them? I tell them it wasn't 6 months. It was 30 years. You laid the groundwork through decades of consistent, careful work. I just helped make it visible. Mr. Chen nodded. That important lesson. Quick fix not real. Real change take time, take patience, take care. But when you do it right, change lasts. They continued walking. Around them, the hospital hummed with purposeful activity. Every system, every process, every workflow had been touched by Mr. Chen's philosophy. Respect for time, respect for work, respect for people. There's one more thing, Sarah said. Patricia wants to name the new training center after you. The Chen Center for Healthcare Excellence. Mr. Chen stopped walking. No. No? Not Chen Center. Call it something else. Something that honor everyone who do invisible work, everyone who make things better without asking for credit. Sarah thought about it. What would you suggest? Maybe the Center for Operational Dignity, because that's what this really about. Giving dignity to all work, not just important-sounding work. Showing that every job done well make the system better. The Center for Operational Dignity, Sarah repeated. I love it. They reached the end of Mr. Chen's route, back where they'd started, 47 minutes, just like always. Some things didn't need to change. You know what the strangest part of all this is? Sarah said. 6 months ago, I was terrified of losing my job. I was focused on survival. I never imagined I'd end up creating something new, something that would help hospitals across the country. That's how change works. You start by trying to save one thing, end up transforming many things, but only if you pay attention along the way. Sarah looked around the hospital. Her hospital, though she'd never have thought of it that way before. Do you think it will last? After we're gone, will people remember why we did this? If we build it right, yes. Not because they remember us, but because systems become natural. Like water cutting through rock. It takes long time, but once path is made, water always follow that path. We make path. Future people will follow, maybe not even knowing why. That okay. Sarah realized he was right. The goal wasn't to be remembered. The goal was to create systems so effective, so intuitive, that they became invisible, just like Mr. Chen himself had been. I should get back to work, Sarah said. Training class starts in 20 minutes. And I should finish my rounds, Mr. Chen gestured at his cart. They parted ways, the director of operational excellence heading to the new training center, the janitor returning to his cart. Two people on different paths doing the same work, making systems better, one small improvement at a time. 3 years after Mercy General's transformation, Sarah received an invitation to speak at a national healthcare conference, the topic, Operational Excellence Through Organizational Dignity. She stood on stage in front of hundreds of hospital administrators, executives, and healthcare professionals and told them the story of Mr. Chen. She told them about the invisible janitor who'd been an expert all along, about 30 years of quiet optimization, about a notebook filled with systems that could transform healthcare, about the hospital that almost died and became a teacher instead. But mostly she told them about what she had learned, that brilliance often exists in places we don't think to look, that the people we overlook might be the people we need most, that transformation doesn't require dramatic gestures or massive investments, just attention, respect, and the willingness to learn from unexpected sources. When she finished, the audience gave her a standing ovation. But Sarah knew the applause wasn't for her. It was for every overlooked worker who'd ever had a better idea. For every person whose expertise had been invisible because of their title or position. For everyone who'd kept doing good work even when nobody noticed. After the speech, a young hospital administrator approached her. "That story about the janitor, is it real?" "Every word," Sarah confirmed. "Where is he now? Can I meet him?" Sarah smiled. "He's probably mopping floors at Mercy General. He still does that 3 days a week. The other 4 days he consults with hospitals like yours, teaching them his methods. But if you want to understand what he's created, don't meet him in a conference room. Meet him while he's working. Watch how he moves, how he thinks, how he sees. That's where the real learning happens." The administrator looked puzzled. "A consultant who mops floors?" "The best consultant I've ever met," Sarah said, "because he never forgot where wisdom comes from, not from degrees or titles, but from paying attention, from caring about the work itself, regardless of recognition." That was the final lesson Sarah had learned from Mr. Chen. Success isn't about being seen. It's about doing work that matters, whether anyone notices or not. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is help others see what's been invisible all along.
The hospital that almost died became a place of healing, not just for patients, but for systems. The nurse who learned to see taught others to notice. And the janitor who had been invisible for 30 years remained partly invisible by choice, comfortable in the knowledge that his work had made a difference. That was enough. It had always been enough. The end.
Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.